I never expected to spend 33 years teaching teenagers how to measure twice and cut once, but looking back, I wouldn't have chosen any other path. Behind my classroom at Westridge Technical High School in Boston, generations of young hands learned to transform raw wood into something useful and lasting. My name is William Carter, and at 62, I've helped hundreds of teenagers find careers in the trades. Some now run their own contracting businesses. That was always enough for me. The teacher's salary in Massachusetts isn't impressive. I've never broken $48,000 a year, but I built a life that meant something. My small ranch house in the suburbs might not turn heads, but I paid off the mortgage 5 years ago. The furniture might be secondhand except for the bookshelf I built myself back in 1989, solid oak with dovetail joints that will outlast me. My daughter Catherine Kate, to everyone who knows her, is my only child. Her mother, my wife Susan, passed away from breast cancer when Kate was 16. The cancer took her quickly, less than 8 months from diagnosis to the day I stood alone with Kate at the cemetery, her hand gripping mine with the kind of strength that comes from necessary courage. It was just the two of us after that, living in our modest home in Medford. Kate was brilliant from the start, straight A's through high school scholarship to Harvard degree in business administration. She got a job at a marketing firm downtown after graduation, climbing the ladder with the same determination she had shown in everything since childhood. I watched her succeed from a distance, proud but increasingly aware of the widening gap between her world and mine. She'd call once a week, visit for dinner once a month. Each time her clothes were a little nicer, her vocabulary a little more refined. I didn't mind. Parents are supposed to want more for their children than they had themselves. She started dating Michael Brooks about 2 years ago. The way she described him, Harvard MBA tech entrepreneur, founder of his own company, I knew immediately he moved in circles I'd never entered. She wanted us to meet, so she arranged dinner at an upscale restaurant in downtown Boston, the kind of place where they don't list prices on the menu. I wore my Navy sport jacket, the good one I'd bought for parent-teacher conferences and the occasional funeral. I arrived 15 minutes early, as was my habit, and waited at the table, nervously adjusting my tie. Kate arrived right on time, beautiful in a black dress I'd never seen before, kissing my cheek before sitting down. Michael's just wrapping up a call with investors. Her voice carried a hint of apology mixed with pride. He'll be here any minute. 20 minutes later, Michael Brooks arrived. No apology, just a smooth entrance and a quick glance at his phone before sliding into his seat. He was 34, Kate's age, with an expensive haircut and the particular confidence of someone accustomed to being listened to. When he finally looked up at me, I watched something shift in his expression as his eyes performed a quick assessment: jacket, watch, shoes, a silent calculation of my worth. His handshake offered the bare minimum pressure. "Mr. Carter, good to finally meet you. Kate's told me so much about you." The way he emphasized so much carried a hint of something I couldn't quite place. "High school teacher, right?" I cleared my throat. "Industrial arts, woodworking, metalwork, technical drafting." His smile never reached his eyes. "Very hands-on, important skills." The way he said important made it sound like anything but. The dinner was excruciating. Michael talked about his company, Horizon Tech Solutions, for 40 straight minutes. They were developing an AI-powered logistics platform that supposedly optimized delivery routes for e-commerce companies. His investors' revenue projections, his 5-year plan to take the company public. Every few minutes, he'd casually mention real entrepreneurship or taking risks instead of playing it safe. When Kate asked about my work, Michael's phone buzzed. He checked it while I was mid-sentence about a student who just secured an apprenticeship with a master carpenter. My story remained unfinished as Michael launched into another anecdote about a conference in San Francisco. The bill came to $280. I reached for my wallet, having brought enough to cover my share, but Michael waved me off with theatrical generosity. "Don't worry about it, Mr. Carter. I've got this. I know teacher pensions in Massachusetts are, well, let's just say they're not exactly generous." Kate smiled at him like he'd done something noble. I drove home that night with my hands tight on the steering wheel of my 12-year-old Civic. It wasn't the money that bothered me. It was the dismissal in his voice, the casual way he'd reduced my life's work to something pitiable. Over the next 6 months, I saw Michael's pattern more clearly. He visited our house once Kate wanted to show him where she'd grown up. He walked through our living room, taking in the worn carpet, the small television, the dining table where Kate had done her homework for years. Cozy, he said, which wasn't a compliment. His parents were worse. Richard and Elizabeth Brooks lived in Beacon Hill in one of those brownstone mansions that cost over $3 million. Richard had made his fortune in pharmaceutical sales, retired at 55. Elizabeth sat on the boards of 3 different charities, none of which actually required her to interact with the people they supposedly helped. They invited us for dinner in September. Their dining room featured a chandelier that probably cost more than my annual salary. Elizabeth served something she called deconstructed coq au vin on plates so delicate I was afraid to cut anything. Richard poured wine I didn't recognize into crystal glasses. "So, William," he leaned forward slightly, "Kate tells us you're in education." I nodded. "I teach at a technical high school. Been there since 1990. Public school." Elizabeth's smile didn't reach her eyes. "How admirable. It must be so rewarding working with those kinds of students." I knew exactly what she meant. The kids who couldn't afford private school, the kids who'd work with the air hands because they weren't heading to Harvard or MIT. My jaw tightened. Very rewarding. Many of my students make excellent livings in the trades, electricians, welders, cabinet makers. Good honest work. Elizabeth took a small sip of wine. Of course, she glanced at Kate, though I imagine Catherine might want something more for her own children someday. Financial security opportunities, the right schools. Kate looked down at her plate. Michael squeezed her hand. "Don't worry," he said with practiced confidence. "I'll make sure Kate and our future family are very well taken care of. Not everyone can provide that kind of life, but fortunately I can." He looked directly at me when he said it. I finished my meal in silence. 3 weeks later, Kate called with news. Michael had proposed. She was ecstatic, talking about wedding venues and dress shopping. I told her I was happy for her, and I meant it. She deserved happiness. But something cold was settling in my chest. The engagement party was at Michael's office in downtown Boston, a converted warehouse in the Seaport district, with exposed brick and industrial light fixtures that cost thousands each. Horizon Tech Solutions occupied the entire 3rd floor. About 70 people attended. Michael's employees, investors, friends of the family. I arrived in my good jacket again. The party was already in full swing. Kate found me by the entrance, beautiful in a cocktail dress I'd never seen before. She hugged me, then pulled back, her smile faltering slightly. "Listen, Michael's about to make a toast. He's a bit nervous about the investors being here, so if anyone asks, maybe just, keep it general about your work." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Kate lowered her voice. "Michael's worried that some of his investors are old-fashioned. They might not understand that teaching is a respectable career." I looked at my daughter, suddenly feeling like a stranger. "You're asking me to downplay being a teacher. I'm asking you not to make tonight difficult." She walked away before I could respond. I found myself standing near the bar, nursing a beer I didn't want, watching Michael work the room. He was good at it, moving from group to group, laughing at the right moments, making everyone feel included except me. He nodded once in my direction when I arrived and hadn't looked at me since. Around 8 o'clock, Michael climbed onto a small stage they'd set up. Someone handed him a microphone. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began. The room quieted. Starting a company requires vision. It requires taking risks that other people won't take. It requires, and I can't stress this enough, the courage to bet on yourself when everyone else is choosing the safe path. He paused. His eyes swept the room and landed on me for just a moment. Growing up, I watched my father build a successful career through ambition and calculated risk. He taught me that security is the enemy of greatness. While some people are content with steady paychecks and summers off, entrepreneurs are building the future. Scattered laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone near me whispered, "Is that a dig at someone?" Elizabeth Brooks, standing with a group of well-dressed women, said, not quite quietly enough, "Well, we can't all afford to take risks when we have modest means. Some people need that government pension." More laughter. Kate's face flushed red, but she didn't say anything. She was standing next to Michael's sister, both looking at their champagne glasses. Michael continued, "I'm grateful Kate understands the difference between settling and striving. She could have chosen an easier life, a more predictable path, but she chose excellence." He raised his glass. Everyone applauded. I set down my beer and walked out. No one stopped me. No one even seemed to notice. I drove home through the October darkness, past the luxury condos on the waterfront, past the restaurants where people paid $30 for appetizers, back to my house, where the porch light was flickering because I hadn't replaced the bulb yet. Inside, I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped Kate with her homework for 12 years, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger exactly, recognition. I'd spent my whole career teaching students to identify problems, analyze structures, find weaknesses in design. Michael Brooks was a structure with weaknesses. I just needed to find them. I went to my basement workshop, pulled out a cardboard box from the storage shelf, and brought it upstairs. Inside were files from the part of my life I rarely discussed. Before becoming a teacher, I'd worked for 6 years as a quality control inspector for an engineering firm. I'd learned to read financial documents, architectural plans, compliance reports. I'd helped identify construction fraud, twice contractors cutting corners, billing for materials they never used. Opening my laptop, I began searching. Horizon Tech Solutions had a website with a press section. I found 3 articles about their recent funding, around $4 million, from a consortium of investors' valuation at $15 million. I spent the next 4 hours reading everything I could find about the company. Their product was an AI logistics platform that supposedly optimized delivery routes for e-commerce companies. Very technical, very impressive sounding, but something felt off about the numbers in their press releases. The next morning, I called an old colleague from my engineering firm days. Martin Thompson had moved into financial analysis, working for a firm that did due diligence on tech startups. "Bill Carter," he answered with genuine warmth. "Must be, what, 8 years and 9. Listen, Martin, I need a favor. You ever heard of a company called Horizon Tech Solutions?" A pause. "Michael Brooks's outfit. Yeah, they've been making noise in the Boston tech scene. Why?" "He's marrying my daughter. I'm trying to understand his business." Another pause, longer this time. "Look, I can't give you proprietary information, but let's just say if I were doing due diligence on that company, I'd have questions." My grip tightened on the phone. "What kind of questions?" "The kind where the revenue projections don't match the actual customer base. The kind where the technical specifications sound impressive, but lack specifics." Martin lowered his voice. "You want my honest opinion? Someone who knows how to read financial statements should take a close look at their numbers." I thanked him and hung up. I spent the next 2 weeks becoming an expert on Horizon Tech Solutions. I read every article, every press release, every public filing with the Massachusetts Business Registry. I found their company documents online. They'd posted some financial projections in a pitch deck to attract investors, and then I found a small notation in their revenue recognition methodology. They were booking future contracted revenue as current income. A client would sign a 3-year contract for $60,000 annually, and Horizon would report $180,000 in immediate revenue, even though they'd only collected the first $20,000. It wasn't illegal, technically, but it was aggressive, very aggressive. And if their client retention rate wasn't as good as they claimed, the whole structure would collapse. I dug deeper. I found a message board for tech workers in Boston where a few former Horizon employees had posted anonymously complaints about unpaid overtime pressure to inflate user engagement numbers, meetings where Michael had told them to be creative with their customer retention statistics. I documented everything. Then I reached out to someone I'd taught 15 years ago. Kevin Chen had been one of my best students. Quiet kid, brilliant with technical drafting. He'd gone on to become a software engineer at a major tech company in Boston. "Mr. Carter," his voice carried genuine pleasure. "This is amazing. How are you?" "I'm well, Kevin. Listen, I need some technical advice. You know anything about AI logistics platforms?" "A bit." "Why, bayi?" I explained what I'd found about Horizon Tech Solutions, left out the personal connection, just framed it as curiosity. Kevin was quiet for a moment. "You're talking about Horizon?" "Yeah, I've heard things. Their technology isn't as sophisticated as they claim. A friend of mine interviewed there last year. He said their AI is basically just an optimization algorithm from the early 2000s with a new interface. Nothing proprietary, nothing innovative." He turned down the job. "Is that something investors would care about if they knew?" "Absolutely. If you're valuing a company at 15 million based on proprietary technology, and it turns out there's no proprietary technology that's fraud. Mr. Carter. I thanked him and added this to my documentation. By mid-November, I had a file folder 2 inches thick. Revenue recognition issues, inflated user metrics technology that was essentially purchased open source software, repackaged customer contracts that were dramatically overstated. None of it was conclusive proof of fraud, but together it painted a picture of a company built on exaggeration at best, lies at worst. The wedding was planned for January 14th at the Nantucket Club. $800 per plate, 150 guests. Kate had asked me for my guest list. I'd given her 5 names, 3 former colleagues, and 2 old friends. 2 weeks later, she'd called to say the venue had capacity constraints. Only 2 of my guests could come. I didn't argue. The week before Christmas, Michael's company held their annual investor gala at the Fairmont Hotel. It was a big event, investors, clients, tech media, even a reporter from the Boston Globe. Michael had invited Kate, obviously, and she'd asked if I wanted to come. Michael said it would be good for you to network, she explained, and I thought maybe you would like to see his world, see what he's built. I said yes. I bought a new suit for the occasion. Nothing extravagant, but well-tailored charcoal gray. I looked like someone who'd spent 33 years earning a respectable living, which is exactly what I was. The ballroom was decorated like something from a tech conference. Blue LED lighting, massive screens showing Horizon Tech metrics and growth projections, tables with those high cocktail chairs designed to keep people from sitting too long. I arrived at 7. Kate found me immediately looking stressed. Dad, thank God. Listen, Michael's really nervous about tonight. Some major investors are here, and he's doing a presentation. Just be supportive, okay? I raised an eyebrow. When have I not been supportive? She gave me a look that suggested she had thoughts about that, but didn't voice them. The presentation started at 8. Michael took the stage in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment had been. Behind him, the screen showed graphs, revenue climbing user base, expanding market projections that looked like hockey sticks. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for believing in Horizon Tech Solutions, he began. 3 years ago, I had a vision. I saw a future where artificial intelligence would revolutionize logistics, where small businesses could compete with giants like Amazon. And I had a choice. Michael clicked to the next slide. I could play it safe, take the easy road, accept a comfortable but unremarkable life, or I could take a risk. He paused for effect, and his eyes found me in the crowd just for a second, but I saw it. So did Kate, who was standing 3 feet away from me. Entrepreneurs are willing to sacrifice security for greatness. We don't want summers off. We want to build empires. Polite laughter rippled through the room. Elizabeth Brooks was standing nearby with a group of other investors' wives. She leaned toward one of them close enough that I could hear, of course, not everyone has the stomach for entrepreneurship. Some people need the safety net of tenure and government benefits. No shame in that. The woman next to her glanced at me, then back at Elizabeth. Is that Kate's father? Elizabeth nodded slightly. He teaches shop class. Very reliable work, I'm sure. More laughter, barely suppressed. Michael continued his presentation. More slides, more impressive sounding numbers. At one point he said, our Q3 revenue was $600,000 with projections for $1.2 million in Q4. We're on track for $8 million annual revenue by next year. I'd seen their actual filings. Their Q3 revenue was closer to $150,000. The $600,000 included 2 years of future contracted payments that hadn't been collected yet. The presentation ended to applause. People swarmed Michael, congratulating him, asking questions. Kate went to his side immediately, beaming. An hour later, after the formal presentation, Michael worked the room with a microphone doing informal Q&A with investors. He made his way near where I was standing with my water glass, talking to a group of younger employees. One of them, clearly several drinks in, said loud enough for everyone to hear, Michael, man, where'd you get the confidence? Like my dad wanted me to be an accountant, something safe. How'd you know to ignore that? Michael laughed. You have to trust yourself more than you trust other people's fear. My father-in-law, for example, he gestured vaguely in my direction, spent his whole life in a classroom, stable pension benefits, and look, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not building anything. It's just maintaining. The group turned to look at me. I was 15 feet away, clearly within earshot. I mean, look at him, Michael continued, his voice carrying. He's wearing what 150 suit, driving a car that's older than some of our interns. That's the safe path. That's what happens when you choose security over ambition. Someone in his group laughed uncomfortably. Michael grinned, encouraged. Honestly, when I first met him, I thought Kate was joking. My dad teaches shop class. Like, buddy, it's 2023. Who still does that? But hey, someone's got to teach the kids who aren't going to college, right? Might as well be someone who's already given up on real success. The laughter was louder now, not everyone. Some people looked uncomfortable, but enough. Elizabeth was laughing behind her champagne flute. Richard Brooks, standing nearby, shook his head with an indulgent smile, like Michael was a precocious child. And Kate, my daughter, was standing at the edge of Michael's circle, her face bright red. She'd heard everything. She looked at me once, just once, and then she turned away and started a conversation with someone else. I set down my water glass and walked toward the exit, past the LED screens, showing false metrics, past the investors who'd swallowed Michael's pitch without questioning the numbers, past my daughter who didn't call after me. In the parking garage, I sat in my 12-year-old Civic and breathed. My hands were shaking not from anger, but from something colder and more focused. Clarity. I drove home, went straight to my basement workshop, and pulled out the file folder I'd been building for 2 months. Everything was documented, every discrepancy, every inflated metric, every piece of evidence that Horizon Tech Solutions was a house of cards. At 11 that night, I composed an email. The recipients were the Massachusetts Securities Division and the Financial Markets Authority. The subject line was formal complaint regarding revenue recognition practices and material misrepresentation by Horizon Tech Solutions, Inc. I attached 30 pages of documentation, financial discrepancies, screenshots of deleted LinkedIn posts from former employees, technical analysis from Kevin Chen about the company's non-proprietary technology comparisons between public statements and actual file documents. I didn't sign it with my name. I used a temporary email address and routed it through a VPN, something a former student who worked in IT security had taught me about. At 11:47 p.m. on December 21st, I hit send. Then I went to bed. Christmas came and went. Kate invited me for dinner at Michael's condo. I went, brought a gift, said nothing about the gala. Michael was pleasant to me in that distant way wealthy people are pleasant to service workers. Kate seemed relieved that I wasn't making things difficult. I spent Boxing Day in my workshop building a jewelry box from reclaimed oak. My hands know this work, measuring, cutting, sanding, fitting joints that will last decades. Honest work. The wedding was 3 weeks away. Kate had asked me to give a speech at the reception. I told her I'd think about it. On January 4th, the article appeared in the Boston Globe's business section. Boston tech startup faces regulatory scrutiny over financial practices. It was a small article, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. It mentioned Horizon Tech Solutions by name. It noted that the company was facing questions from securities regulators about its revenue recognition methods and whether it had made material misrepresentations to investors. Michael's company issued a statement calling it a routine inquiry and expressing confidence in their financial practices. But I knew how these things worked. Once regulators start asking questions, they don't stop. And when they looked closely at Horizon's numbers, they'd find exactly what I'd found. Kate called me that evening, her voice tight. Did you see the article? I did. Michael is devastated. This could ruin everything, the wedding, the company, his reputation. If his numbers are honest, he has nothing to worry about. A long silence stretched between us. Dad, you didn't have anything to do with this, did you? I closed my eyes. Me, I'm a shop teacher. Remember, I teach kids how to use table saws. What would I know about securities regulation? Another silence, longer this time. I have to go, she said and hung up. Over the next week, 3 more articles appeared, one in the Boston Herald, one in TechCrunch, one in Massachusetts Business Magazine. Each one cited unnamed sources familiar with the investigation. Each one dug a little deeper into Horizon Tech's questionable practices. 2 of Michael's major investors pulled out, citing concerns about financial transparency. The company's valuation dropped from $15 million to $8 million in less than 10 days. On January 10th, 4 days before the wedding, Michael called me directly. It was the first time he'd called me in 2 years of dating my daughter. "Mr. Carter, we need to talk about what's happening." "About what?" His voice hardened. "You know damn well about what. The investigation, the articles. This all started right after the gala." "Coincidence, I suppose." "I know this was you. I don't know how, but I know." I sat back in my chair, suddenly tired. "Michael, I'm a 62-year-old shop teacher. I don't have the kind of connections or knowledge to trigger a securities investigation." "You're trying to destroy my company. I didn't create the problems they're finding. You did." He hung up. The wedding went ahead as planned. I wore my new suit. I sat where I was assigned, table 19 near the kitchen doors, with cousins of Michael's I'd never met. Kate was beautiful walking down the aisle, and for those 3 minutes, I forgot everything else and just watched my daughter. The reception was formal and expensive and perfectly choreographed. I sat quietly through dinner, through the speeches, through Michael's toast where he thanked his parents for showing him what success looks like. I didn't give a speech. Kate had quietly removed me from the schedule. At the end of the night, as guests were leaving, Michael approached me. We were standing by the coat check alone for the first time. "I don't know exactly what you did," he said quietly, "but it's not over. My lawyers are looking into everything. And when they find proof, You'll what?" I met his eyes. "Sue me for what? I haven't done anything illegal. I haven't lied about you. I haven't harassed you. If there's an investigation into your business practices, that's between you and the regulators." His jaw clenched. "You're a bitter old man who couldn't handle that your daughter chose someone successful." I shook my head slowly. "No, I'm a father who taught his daughter to value honesty. You should try it sometime." I left him standing there and drove home. 2 weeks after the wedding, the final blow came. The Massachusetts Securities Division released their preliminary findings. Horizon Tech Solutions had materially misrepresented their revenue by booking multi-year contracts as immediate income. They'd inflated their user base by counting trial accounts as active subscribers. Their proprietary AI technology was in fact open-source software with minimal modifications. The company's valuation dropped to $3 million. 5 investors sued for fraud. Michael's board of directors voted him out as CEO. Kate didn't call me. I went back to teaching. In February, I started a new semester with a class of grade 11 students learning basic woodworking. One of them, a kid named Marcus, who'd been bouncing between foster homes, showed real talent with a chisel. I stayed after class twice a week to work with him. In March, on a Sunday morning, there was a knock at my door. Kate stood on my porch, her eyes red. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. We sat in my kitchen at the same table where I'd done my research, where I'd built the case that destroyed her husband's company. "Michael knows it was you," she said. "He can't prove it, but he knows. Is that why you're here, to accuse me?" "No." She was crying now. "I'm here because I need to know why. Why would you do that to him?" "Do what?" "Tell the truth about his business practices. Destroy his career, humiliate him, ruin everything we'd built together." I looked at my daughter, this brilliant woman I'd raised alone, and chose my words carefully. At that gala, Michael called me a failure. He mocked my career, my car, my clothes, everything I've built in 33 years. He did it publicly, deliberately, to humiliate me. And you, Kate, you stood there and said nothing. You turned away. She flinched. "I'm not a rich man," I continued. "I never will be. I make $48,000 a year, helping teenagers learn skills that will earn them honest livings. I drive an old car and live in a small house, and I'm proud of that." But Michael looked at my life and saw failure. He saw something worth mocking. "It was just talk, Dad. He didn't mean." Yes, he did. And worse, his company was built on lies. Those investors who trusted him, he was defrauding them. Those employees who believed in his vision, he was inflating metrics to keep them working overtime without proper compensation. That's not entrepreneurship. That's fraud. "So you destroyed him?" "No, I exposed him. There's a difference." Kate wiped her eyes. "I should have defended you at the engagement party. At the gala, I should have said something." "Yes, you should have." We sat in silence for a long moment. "Michael's working for a consulting firm now," she said finally. $45,000 a year. He's angry all the time. At me, at himself, at you. The marriage is barely holding together. I'm sorry you're going through that. Are you, though? I thought about it. I'm sorry you're in pain. I'm not sorry I held him accountable. She nodded slowly. He asked me to choose between you and him. My chest tightened. What did you say? I said I needed time to think. She stood gathering her coat. I'm going to stay with a friend for a while, figure some things out. You're always welcome here. She paused at the door. I looked into what you did. The documentation you must have gathered, the analysis, the way you filed the complaint, so it couldn't be traced back to you. That wasn't the work of a washed-up shop teacher. I smiled faintly. I told you I teach kids to find problems and fix them. Michael was the problem. Michael's dishonesty was the problem. I just fixed it. She left without another word. I stood at my kitchen window watching her car disappear down the street and felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction exactly. Maybe just peace. I'd stood up for myself. I'd used the skills I'd spent a lifetime developing: patience, attention to detail, thorough analysis to defend my dignity. Michael Brooks had learned that contempt has consequences. 3 months later, I sat at my workbench in the basement, carefully sanding the curved back of a rocking chair I'd been building for weeks. The rhythmic motion had always calmed me, helped me think. Sawdust caught in beams of afternoon light filtering through the small window. My phone vibrated on the workbench, interrupting the quiet. A text from Kate. Signed divorce papers today. No emotion, just 5 words that confirmed what I'd suspected was coming. I hadn't heard from her since that Sunday in March when she'd come to my house with red-rimmed eyes. 94 days of silence. I'd marked each one on my workshop calendar, considered calling dozens of times, but always set the phone down. Some distances needed to be crossed willingly or not at all. The Massachusetts Securities Division had released their full investigation findings the previous week. The Boston Globe ran a front-page article in the business section: Horizon Tech CEO Michael Brooks faces fraud charges. The authorities had uncovered evidence of deliberate financial misrepresentation beyond even what I'd found: falsified client contracts, manipulated demo software presented as proprietary technology, investor funds redirected to personal accounts. Criminal charges were being considered. I blew sawdust from the chair's arm, ran my fingers along the grain to feel for imperfections. My phone vibrated again. Can I come over tomorrow? My heart lurched. I texted back a single word: anytime. That night, sleep proved elusive. I stood at my bedroom window looking at the half moon hanging over my quiet street. The trees were just beginning to bud, promising renewal after a particularly harsh winter. I thought about Kate as a little girl, how she'd climb into my lap during thunderstorms, trusting me completely to keep her safe. I wondered when I'd lost that trust, or if I'd broken it myself with what I'd done to Michael. Saturday morning arrived with unexpected warmth. I spent the early hours in the garden Susan had once loved, clearing winter debris, making space for new growth. At 10 o'clock, Kate's silver Audi pulled into my driveway, a car purchased during better financial times before Michael's world collapsed. She stepped out, looking thinner than I remembered, dark circles shadowing her eyes. She carried a cardboard box. In my kitchen, she set the box on the table and pulled out a folder of legal documents. My lawyer says I'm lucky. The investors aren't coming after me personally since my name wasn't on any company documents. Michael kept me separate from the business. Her voice sounded hollow, practiced. But everything else is gone. The condo, the savings, even my reputation in marketing circles. Nobody wants to hire someone connected to a financial fraud scandal. The weight of consequence hung in the air between us. I'd never intended my actions to hurt Kate, only Michael. But the blast radius of justice rarely stays contained. I've been sleeping on Jen's couch for 2 months. I finally found a tiny apartment in Somerville. It's modest. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. She'd returned to the kind of life she'd been so desperate to escape, the life Michael had mocked. I watched her unpack more items from the box: a framed photo of us from her college graduation, a wooden music box I'd made for her 16th birthday, small treasures from a life before Michael. When did you know? Kate finally looked directly at me. When did you first suspect something was wrong with Horizon? The first night I met him, I admitted. While the financial specifics, but the character behind them. People who need to diminish others are usually compensating for something. The numbers just confirmed what his behavior suggested. Kate nodded slowly. The SEC investigator asked me how I could have missed the warning signs. I've asked myself the same question every night. Her hands trembled slightly as she arranged her belongings on the table. I have an MBA from Harvard. I should have seen it. We don't see clearly when we're in love, I offered, or when we want something badly enough. What I wanted, Kate's voice faltered. What I thought I wanted was the life his parents had, the security, the elegance, a life where nobody would ever look down on me for where I came from. The painful truth hung between us. In pursuing that life, she had become the very person who looked down on her origins on me. 2 weeks after the wedding, before everything fell apart, Elizabeth invited me to lunch with her charity board friends. I wore my nicest dress, the pearl necklace Michael bought me for Christmas. Kate's bitter laugh held no humor. They spent the entire meal talking about their household staff, their summer homes, their children's private school connections. I kept thinking how desperately I wanted them to accept me and how empty the conversation was. That was the first time I wondered if I'd made a mistake. The realization had come too late. By then, the wheels of consequence were already turning, set in motion by my email to the authorities. My actions had accelerated her disillusionment, but the marriage had been built on an unstable foundation. Michael's lies, Kate's aspirations, mutual pretense. I've been offered a client, Kate said suddenly. Nothing glamorous. Assistant marketing manager at a nonprofit. It pays $42,000. The salary she'd once have considered beneath her now represented salvation. I start Monday. I nodded, feeling an unexpected surge of pride. You'll rebuild. That's not why I'm here. Kate pulled one last item from the box, a thick manila envelope. Last week, I went through the storage unit where we kept Michael's home office boxes after downsizing to the condo. I found something I think you should see. She spread the contents across my kitchen table. Printouts of emails between Michael and a private investigator dated 2 weeks after our first dinner together. Bank statements showing payments to someone named Davis Investigations. Detailed reports on my finances, employment history, personal habits. Photos of me leaving school, shopping at the hardware store, even working in my garden. He had you investigated. The realization hit like a physical blow. Michael hadn't simply judged me as inadequate. He'd actively sought ammunition. Kate's eyes were steady now, anger replacing hurt. He was looking for weaknesses, something he could use if you ever became inconvenient. The investigator found your background in quality control and engineering. Michael knew you weren't just a shop teacher. He knew exactly who he was insulting at that gala. The calculated nature of the insult somehow made it worse. Michael's contempt hadn't been casual. It had been deliberate, informed, a power play executed with full awareness. Kate wasn't finished. She pulled out a final document, a prenuptial agreement I hadn't known existed. Look at Section 12. She pointed to a clause specifying that in case of divorce, if Kate's father interfered in Brooke's family business interests, she would forfeit all community property and financial considerations. He made me sign this the week before the wedding, said his parents insisted. Kate's voice was barely audible. I asked what constituted interference. He laughed and said I shouldn't worry about it unless you were planning to cause problems. A trap set in legal language anticipating exactly what had happened. Michael had foreseen the possibility that I might discover his fraudulent practices, had taken precautions to ensure Kate would suffer if I acted. I'd walked right into it believing I was only hurting him. The clause is unenforceable, Kate continued. My divorce attorney said it's unconscionably vague and possibly coercive, but it shows his intent, his character. He viewed me as collateral, a way to control you if necessary. The full weight of the situation settled on me. Michael hadn't just been dishonest in business. He'd approached his marriage with the same calculating dishonesty. Kate hadn't been a partner. She'd been an acquisition, a shield, a tool. I'm sorry, I offered the words wholly inadequate. Kate gathered the documents, returning them to the envelope. I'm not asking for an apology. I made my choices, but I wanted you to understand that what you exposed wasn't just financial fraud. It was who he is at his core. She straightened her shoulders slightly. And I wanted you to know that I see it now. All of it. That afternoon, we began the slow work of rebuilding. Kate helped me in the garden, remembering where Susan had always planted the tomatoes, which corner got the best sunlight for herbs. We ordered pizza and ate it on the back porch, talking about her new job, my students' neutral territory, where we could meet as adults without reopening wounds still fresh. When she left, the hug she gave me felt different, not the obligation of a daughter to a father, but the gesture of one survivor to another. "I'll call you next week," she promised. This time I believed her. Monday morning found me back at West Ridge Technical High, facing 24 juniors in my woodshop class. Among them sat Marcus, the foster kid with natural talent I'd been mentoring. He'd completed his jewelry box project for his foster mother, dovetail joints, perfect finish, immaculate. Now he was sketching designs for a desk he wanted to build, showing ambition beyond his years. "If I sell it, could I make another?" His question carried cautious hope. "My foster dad says I could set up a small business if I can show it makes money." "Craftsmanship always has value," I replied, examining his design, "but it requires patience and absolute honesty about what you can deliver." The lesson felt personal, now weighted with recent experience. Build with integrity, and the work speaks for itself. After school, Principal Goodwin called me into his office, a rare occurrence that usually signaled trouble. I found him reviewing a proposal document, reading, glasses perched on his nose. "Carter, you know anything about this?" He slid the paper across his desk. "State education grant application requesting funds for an expanded technical education program. Horizon Technical Skills Initiative designed to provide advanced training for students seeking trades careers." First I'm hearing of it, I admitted, skimming the document. "Well, someone thinks highly of your program. The state's looking to fund vocational education that leads directly to employment. They reached out to us specifically because of your placement rate." Goodwin leaned back in his chair. 92% of your students find apprenticeships or entry-level positions within 6 months of graduation. Did you know that I hadn't known the exact figure? I'd simply focused on teaching skills that had real-world application, connecting students with industry contacts I'd built over decades. Keeping records hadn't seemed important. "They want to use Westridge as a pilot program. Double your classroom space, update equipment, add certification courses." Goodwin removed his glasses. "They're asking if you'd be willing to design the curriculum. Would include a salary bump, of course." The opportunity felt like vindication. While Michael's empire of deception had crumbled, my quiet work of 3 decades had been noticed, valued. I thought of all the students like Marcus who could benefit. "I'd be honored," I said simply. Spring flowed into summer. Kate called weekly, came for dinner every other Sunday. She'd settled into her apartment and her new job with a determination I recognized. The nonprofit worked with homeless veterans, providing housing assistance and job training. Her marketing skills were being used for something meaningful rather than just profitable. One Sunday in July, she arrived with unexpected news. "I've been contacted by 3 of Michael's former investors," she said, setting down her purse. "They want my help." My protective instincts flared immediately. "What kind of help?" "They're starting a fund to invest in legitimate tech startups with solid fundamentals. No flash, no exaggerated promises. They want me to develop guidelines for spotting dishonest pitches, warning signs, and business plans." A small, satisfied smile crossed her face. "Apparently having been married to a fraud gives me valuable perspective. Are you considering it?" I already said yes. Kate poured herself iced tea from the pitcher in my refrigerator. "It's consulting work, pays well, and might actually prevent someone else from being deceived the way they were, the way I was." She'd found a way to transform her painful experience into something useful. I recognized the impulse. It was how I'd approached teaching all these years, using my engineering background to help students avoid pitfalls I'd seen in industry. "They're calling it the Integrity Fund," Kate added. "One of the partners suggested I reach out to you too, said they could use someone with your analytical skills and experience in spotting structural weaknesses." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. The very skills Michael had mocked might now help prevent others from falling victim to similar schemes. I promised to consider it. The following week brought unexpected consequences. A reporter from the Boston Globe requested an interview about the vocational education grant. The resulting article, "From Workshop to Workforce: How One Teacher's Approach is Reshaping Technical Education," appeared on a Sunday complete with photos of my classroom and quotes from former students now running successful businesses. Monday morning, my phone rang before dawn. Martin Thompson, my old colleague from the engineering firm who'd first confirmed my suspicions about Horizon. "Tell me you didn't do it," he demanded without preamble. "Do what?" "The SEC investigation into Horizon, the anonymous tip that started everything. Please tell me that wasn't you." I said nothing, which was answer enough. Martin exhaled slowly. "Bill, the financial community is smaller than you think. People talk. There's speculation about who brought Brooks down, and your name has come up, especially after yesterday's article about your engineering background." "They can't prove anything," I replied, feeling the first stirrings of unease. "That's not the point. Brooks still has connections. Powerful friends who lost money when Horizon collapsed. They're looking for someone to blame besides him." Martin's voice dropped lower. "Watch your back and check your credit report, your bank accounts. These people play rough." The warning proved prescient. That afternoon, the school secretary transferred a call to my classroom phone, a local bank where I'd never had an account, questioning a loan application submitted in my name that morning. Identity theft, the first salvo in what would become a campaign of harassment. By week's end, my credit score had plummeted due to multiple fraudulent applications. My home email was flooded with subscriptions I'd never requested. Pizza deliveries arrived at my house at 3 a.m. Small, petty attacks designed to disrupt rather than destroy. I reported everything to the police, installed security cameras around my house, and waited for the next move. It came through Kate, of course. Her new boss called her into his office looking uncomfortable. "Someone from the Brooks Foundation contacted our biggest donor," he explained, "suggested they might want to reconsider supporting an organization that employs the daughter of a man who, quote, maliciously destroyed a promising Boston tech company out of personal jealousy." The foundation was run by Elizabeth Brooks. Michael's mother had found a way to strike at Kate's newfound stability. The donor fortunately had dismissed the suggestion, but the message was clear. The Brooks family knew, or at least strongly suspected, and they weren't finished. Kate brought this news to my house that evening, worried but resolute. "They can't touch the nonprofit without hurting the veterans we serve. Even Elizabeth isn't that heartless." "Don't underestimate people who feel entitled to retaliation," I cautioned. Michael didn't develop his character in a vacuum. We were discussing security measures when headlights swept across my living room window. A car pulling into my driveway, engine shutting off. Kate peered through the planes, then stepped back in shock. "It's Michael." He stood on my porch in the gathering dusk, a diminished version of the confident entrepreneur who had once mocked me. His expensive suit had been replaced by department store business casual. The designer watch was gone. Even his posture had changed, shoulders slightly hunched, the unconscious defensive stance of someone accustomed to recent defeat. I opened the door before he could knock. His eyes widened slightly at seeing Kate behind me, clearly not expecting her presence. "We need to talk," Michael stated flatly. "All three of us." In my living room, he declined a seat, remaining standing, like a man prepared to make a quick exit. "I know what you did," he addressed me directly. "The anonymous complaint to the securities division. Very clever using a VPN, but they shared the technical evidence with my lawyers during discovery. The complaint came from this neighborhood on the night of the gala." I said nothing, neither confirming nor denying. Kate moved to stand beside me, a silent declaration of allegiance that didn't escape Michael's notice. "I'm not here for revenge," he continued, "though God knows I'd be entitled. I'm here to make a deal." "What kind of deal could you possibly offer?" Kate's voice held nothing but contempt. "Information for information." Michael ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd never seen before. "Richard and Elizabeth aren't just angry about losing status and money. They're scared. The foundation's finances are being scrutinized now because of my case. There are irregularities. The Brooks family's pristine facade was cracking. The investigation into Horizon had apparently opened doors the elder Brooks would have preferred remain closed. My father convinced me to take certain actions with Horizon's accounts," Michael admitted. "Strategies he'd used for years with the foundation. I didn't invent the accounting methods, I inherited them." "You're throwing your father under the bus." Kate's disgust was palpable. "I'm trying to save myself from federal prison," Michael snapped. "The prosecutors are offering a deal if I cooperate against bigger fish. My parents qualify." The full picture emerged gradually. Richard Brooks had been using the family's charitable foundation for tax evasion and self-dealing for over a decade. He taught Michael the same techniques, encouraging him to apply them to Horizon. Now, federal investigators were connecting dots between father and son, building a larger case. "Here's my offer," Michael said, addressing me directly. "I tell the prosecutors I acted alone with Horizon. No mention of Richard's advice or foundation connections. In exchange, you tell me exactly what evidence you gathered and how you obtained it so I can protect myself from any potential illegalities in your methods." He thought I'd broken laws to expose him, was offering a mutual protection pact. The desperation in his eyes told the real story. He was still hoping to salvage something from his relationship with his parents, still seeking their approval despite everything. "There's nothing illegal about noticing fraud and reporting it to authorities," I replied calmly. "I have nothing to hide." Michael's facade cracked further. "You deliberately targeted me because I insulted you. Don't pretend this was some noble act of consumer protection." "You're right," I acknowledged, surprising him. "I looked into your company because you belittled me and my profession. But what I found was real. I didn't fabricate evidence. I didn't plant false information. The fraud was all yours. My father will lose everything." Michael's voice had lost its edge, revealing the scared child beneath. "Mother, too." "Actions have consequences," Katie interjected. "Isn't that what you always said about real entrepreneurship? Taking risks means accepting potential losses." Michael turned to her, seeing perhaps for the first time the woman she'd become in his absence. "I never meant to hurt you, Kate. You were supposed to be protected." "Protected?" Her laugh held no humor. "You used me as insurance against my father. That prenup clause about interference, I found it, Michael. I know exactly what you were doing." Color drained from his face. "That was my father's idea. Standard procedure," he said. "Of course it was," Kate replied. "The Brooks family approach to relationships, everyone's a potential asset or liability to be managed." Michael looked between us, recognition dawning that there would be no deal, no mutual protection. "You've already won," he said bitterly. "My career is over. My reputation is destroyed. What more do you want?" I studied him carefully, this man who had once held my daughter's heart, who had nearly become family. Despite everything, I felt an unexpected flicker of pity. "I don't want anything from you, Michael. I never did. I simply wanted respect, not admiration, just basic human respect." "Well, I hope it was worth it," he replied, moving toward the door. "The prosecutors have my final statement tomorrow morning. I'll be making decisions about my future and the future of my family." After he left, Kate and I sat in silence, absorbing what had transpired. "He's going to protect his parents," she finally said, "even now after everything." "Some patterns are hard to break," I observed. "He still craves their approval." The following week brought news via the Boston Globe. Michael Brooks had accepted a plea deal admitting to securities fraud while maintaining he had acted alone. He would serve 18 months in a minimum security facility, followed by 3 years of probation. Richard and Elizabeth Brooks announced they were closing their family foundation and relocating to Florida. Kate and I followed the news together over dinner at my house, a new Sunday tradition we'd established. "I feel sorry for him in a way," she admitted. "He'll never be free of them, even now." "We're all shaped by our upbringing," I replied. "The difference is whether we recognize those patterns and work to change them." Kate nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about patterns too. How I was so desperate to escape what I saw as a limited life that I almost lost the most valuable things in it." And she reached across the table to take my hand. "I'm sorry, Dad, not just for not defending you, but for ever being ashamed of where I came from." The apology meant more than she could know, not because I needed to hear it, but because it represented her own healing, her reclamation of values that had temporarily been buried beneath ambition and insecurity. "I've applied to teach a marketing course at Bunker Hill Community College," Kate announced. "Just one evening class to start. Practical skills for small business owners. It doesn't pay much, but it matters," I finished for her. "Yeah." Her smile reminded me of Susan. "It matters." Summer faded into fall. My expanded vocational program at Westridge Technical launched with 42 students, including 6 young women, a record for technical education at our school. Marcus had become something of a teaching assistant, helping newer students master basic skills while developing his own furniture-making business with my guidance. Kate's consulting work with the Integrity Fund had expanded to include educational workshops for potential investors. She'd moved to a slightly larger apartment, begun dating casually, and seemed genuinely content with her recalibrated life. The wounds inflicted by Michael's betrayal were healing, though scars remained. One crisp October evening, almost exactly a year after the gala where everything had begun to unravel, Kate arrived at my house with an unexpected proposal. "The fund wants to establish a scholarship," she explained over coffee at my kitchen table, "for students pursuing vocational education after high school. They've asked if we could name it after you. The William Carter Excellence in Craftsmanship Scholarship would provide full tuition and tools for 2 graduating seniors each year, with preference given to students from disadvantaged backgrounds." The irony wasn't lost on either of us, Michael's former investors funding the very educational path he had dismissed as failure. "Life takes unexpected turns," I observed, considering the offer. Kate's smile held new wisdom. "Sometimes the longest route leads exactly where you need it to go." That weekend, we worked together in my workshop, building a display cabinet for her apartment. I showed her how to cut perfect joints, how to bring out the grain with proper finishing techniques. Her hands were tentative at first, but gained confidence with each step. The legacy of craft passing between generations, bridging the gap that had once threatened to separate us permanently. As the afternoon light filtered through sawdust in the air, Kate looked up from her work. "You know what I realized recently? Michael always talked about building things, but he never actually created anything real. It was all projections and promises and PowerPoint slides." She ran her fingers along the wood we were shaping. "This is real. What you've built all these years with your hands, with your students. It's tangible, it lasts." In that moment, I understood that the true victory wasn't exposing Michael's fraud or even vindicating my profession. It was this reconciliation, this recognition that value isn't measured in dollar signs or status symbols, but in work done with integrity, in relationships that withstand testing. "There's an old woodworker's saying," and I told her, "the quality of your work reflects the quality of your character. Shortcuts show eventually." Kate nodded thoughtfully. "I wish I'd understood that sooner." "You understand it now," I replied. "That's what matters." Spring arrived early the following year, bringing with it a renewed sense of purpose. The William Carter Excellence in Craftsmanship Scholarship had selected its first 2 recipients: Marcus, my talented foster student, and Sophia Diaz, a young woman from Dorchester, whose single mother worked 3 jobs to keep their family afloat. Both students possessed extraordinary skill and determination. Both would now have opportunities that might otherwise have remained out of reach. The scholarship announcement ceremony took place in West Ridge Technical High's auditorium, transformed for the occasion with displays of student craftsmanship. Kate had organized everything, collaborating with Principal Goodwin and the Integrity Fund investors. I sat uncomfortably in the place of honor on stage, unaccustomed to public recognition after decades of quiet teaching. "The true value of education lies not in prestige or pedigree," Kate addressed the gathered students, parents, and local media, "but in the acquisition of real skills that allow you to create something of lasting worth." My father understood this long before it became fashionable. His students have built homes, restored historic buildings, crafted furniture that will become family heirlooms. They've learned that honest work performed with excellence never goes out of style. As she spoke, I noticed something subtle but significant. Kate's entire demeanor had shifted from a year earlier. The desperate social climbing and status anxiety that had drawn her to Michael had been replaced by authentic confidence. She stood at the podium in a simple but elegant dress, no designer labels or status symbols required. The ceremony concluded with Marcus and Sophia receiving their scholarship certificates, both overcome with emotion. Marcus's foster parents beamed from the front row, the same foster parents who'd received the jewelry box he'd crafted under my guidance. Sophia's mother wept openly, clutching her younger children's hands. Afterward, during the reception, Kate introduced me to James Harrington, one of the Integrity Fund partners, who had lost significantly in the Horizon Tech collapse. "William's method of evaluating structural integrity has applications far beyond woodworking," she explained. "The analytical framework he taught me has transformed how we assess business plans. Harrington, a dignified man in his 60s, extended his hand. Your daughter's insights have already saved us from two potentially disastrous investments. She has a remarkable talent for spotting hidden weaknesses in financial projections. She always had an eye for detail, I replied, even as a child. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, it seems. Harrington's expression turned serious. I've been meaning to thank you personally. Not many would have taken the risk you did to expose Brooks. Most people see fraud and look the other way, especially when it might hurt family relationships. The acknowledgement felt strange, uncomfortable, yet validating. For months, I'd questioned whether my actions had been righteous or merely vengeful. Hearing someone who had suffered direct financial harm express gratitude provided a different perspective. Speaking of Brooks, Harrington continued, lowering his voice. Heard anything about his release plans? The 18 months will be up soon. I shook my head. Kate and I had deliberately avoided discussion of Michael's impending return to society. His shadow had grown fainter over time but never completely disappeared. Well, if you're interested, Harrington said, word in financial circles is that Richard Brooks has essentially disowned him. Cut him off completely after he started serving his sentence. Apparently, Michael finally refused to take all the blame in some closed-door deposition. The parents relocated permanently to Naples, Florida. The news wasn't entirely surprising. The Brooks family operated on conditional love status achievement, and loyalty were required for acceptance. Michael had failed on all counts. Now he would face the world without the safety net of family wealth and connections that had bolstered him since birth. That evening, Kate and I discussed the ceremony over dinner at a small Italian restaurant near her apartment. Your speech was impressive, I told her, though you gave me far more credit than I deserve. Kate twirled pasta on her fork thoughtfully. I've been thinking a lot about credit lately, about recognition versus actual value. Michael was obsessed with recognition awards, press mentions, investor accolades, but he created nothing of actual value. And now I'm helping the fund establish a mentorship program, connecting skilled tradespeople with young entrepreneurs developing physical products. Real goods, not just apps and platforms. Her eyes sparkled with genuine enthusiasm. There's this incredible furniture maker in Western Massachusetts creating pieces that combine traditional joinery with modern design, and a metal worker in Worcester making custom architectural fixtures. They've never considered themselves entrepreneurs, but they're creating sustainable businesses built on genuine skill. Kate had found her calling, bridging the worlds of craft and commerce, helping artisans build sustainable businesses while teaching investors to value tangible quality over empty promises. It was meaningful work that honored both her education and the values she'd grown up with. Did Harrington mention Michael to you? She asked suddenly. I nodded, sharing what I'd learned about Richard and Elizabeth's final rejection of their son. Kate was quiet for a moment. It's strange. I spent 2 years desperate for their approval. Now I just feel sorry for all three of them. The Brooks family defined success very narrowly, I observed. Wealth, status, the appearance of perfection. There was no room for failure, no capacity for forgiveness. Unlike our family, Kate reached across the table to squeeze my hand briefly. We've gotten pretty good at forgiveness. The reconciliation between us had deepened over the months, transforming from tentative peace to genuine closeness. Kate had become a regular at my Sunday workshop sessions, developing surprising skill with carving tools. I'd begun attending her marketing seminars, proud to see her sharing knowledge with small business owners who reminded me of my former students. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected email that would test our newfound equilibrium. The sender was Michael Brooks. The subject line read simply, "Request to meet." The message was brief and surprisingly humble. He had completed his sentence and was living in a halfway house in Somerville, ironically not far from Kate's apartment. He was enrolled in a restitution program and seeking to make amends to those he'd harmed. He asked if I would be willing to meet one-on-one at a public location of my choosing. I forwarded the email to Kate without comment. Her reply came within minutes. Your decision, I'll support whatever you choose. For 3 days, I debated internally. There was no legal obligation to meet with Michael. The case was closed, his debt to society technically paid through incarceration and financial penalties. Yet something in his request nagged at me, perhaps the absence of the entitled tone that had characterized all our previous interactions. I replied with a date, time, and location, a coffee shop near Westridge Technical, where I sometimes graded papers. Neutral territory, but on my home turf. Michael arrived precisely on time, another departure from past behavior. Prison had changed him physically. He'd lost weight, and the designer haircut had grown out into something more generic. His clothes were off-the-rack basics, a far cry from the tailored suits he'd once worn. But the most striking change was in his demeanor. The aggressive confidence had vanished, replaced by watchful caution. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he began, hands wrapped around a paper coffee cup. "I wasn't sure you would." I studied him carefully. "What exactly do you want, Michael?" "Part of my rehabilitation program involves making amends where possible. Not just apologies. Those are cheap, but actual behavioral change and restitution." He pulled a notebook from a worn backpack. "I've had a lot of time to think about the kind of person I was, the values I prioritized. I've begun to understand how deeply I hurt people, including Kate." "Including Kate, or especially Kate?" I pressed. Michael's gaze dropped to his coffee. "Especially Kate, but also investors who trusted me, employees who believed in the company, and yes, you." He looked up, making deliberate eye contact. "I treated you with contempt from our first meeting. I judged you by shallow metrics, your clothes, your car, your job title. I mocked your career publicly to elevate myself. It was inexcusable." The apology seemed genuine, lacking the calculated quality I'd come to expect from Michael. Prison apparently had a way of stripping away pretense. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he continued. "I don't deserve it. But I am asking for an opportunity to make partial restitution." "What kind of restitution could you possibly offer?" Michael opened his notebook. "I'm working with a nonprofit that helps former inmates develop job skills. One of their programs involves basic carpentry and furniture restoration. The instructor is, well, he's well-meaning but undertrained. The students aren't learning properly." He pushed a flyer across the table. "They need someone who actually knows what they're doing. Someone who can teach real skills with patience and precision." The request caught me completely off guard. Michael was asking me to volunteer teaching ex-offenders, people like him, woodworking skills. The irony was almost too perfect. "This isn't about me getting something from you," Michael added, perhaps sensing my skepticism. "The program needs help. The participants deserve better instruction than they're getting. Your skill set would be invaluable. And this would somehow constitute amends to you." "No, this would constitute amends from me. Using my connections, what few I have left, to help others while acknowledging your expertise." And then he paused. "I understand if you refuse, but I had to ask." I told him I'd think about it, making no promises. That evening, I called Kate to discuss the encounter. "It could be genuine," she said after listening to my account, "or it could be another manipulation. Prison psychologists report that some inmates become remarkably skilled at appearing reformed while actually refining their techniques. What's your gut feeling?" I valued Kate's insight. She had lived with Michael, had seen sides of him I hadn't. "My therapist would caution against making decisions based on gut feelings about someone who betrayed my trust," Kate replied carefully. "That said, there were moments with Michael, private moments, when the performance dropped and something authentic showed through. Usually when he talked about his childhood, the constant pressure to achieve, to be exceptional. I think there's a decent person somewhere underneath all the layers of Brooks' family conditioning." In the end, I decided to observe one session of the carpentry program before committing. The facility was in Charlestown, housed in a renovated warehouse space divided into stations for different skills: training, computer literacy, food service, basic construction. The woodworking area occupied a far corner equipped with donated tools of varying quality. Michael hadn't exaggerated the instruction problems. The current teacher, a general contractor who volunteered Saturdays, was showing 8 participants how to build simple shelving units. His techniques were haphazard measurements, approximate joints poorly executed. The resulting pieces would likely collapse under any significant weight. The participants themselves were a diverse group, men and women ranging from their 20s to 50s, most newly released from incarceration, all trying to rebuild lives derailed by poor choices or circumstances. They reminded me of many students I'd taught over the years, people with potential, needing only proper guidance and opportunity. One participant, a woman in her early 40s named Denise, was clearly struggling with a hand plane, unable to achieve a smooth surface. The instructor had moved on without addressing her difficulty. I found myself stepping forward instinctively. The angle is too steep, I explained, demonstrating the proper technique. Try holding it like this with even pressure. Denise adjusted her grip, made another pass. Wood shavings curled perfectly from the plane. Her face lit up with accomplishment. That's the first thing that's worked right all day. By session's end, I'd decided to volunteer twice monthly. I didn't do it for Michael's redemption narrative. I did it for Denise and the others who deserve proper instruction. Michael had merely pointed me toward a need I was uniquely qualified to fill. News of my involvement with the ex-offender program traveled quickly through Westridge Technical. Principal Goodwin called me into his office, concerned about potential controversy. Parents might object to their children's teacher associating with former inmates, he warned. The same parents who want their children to learn trade skills that could lead to good jobs, I countered. The same skills that might prevent future incarceration by providing economic stability. Goodwin conceded the point but remained cautious. Just keep the activities separate. School board members get nervous about these connections. I'd expected such concerns, but was determined to continue. What I hadn't anticipated was the effect on my regular students. Marcus, now preparing for graduation in his scholarship, approached me after class. Heard you're teaching woodworking to people who've been in prison, he said, arranging tools with careful precision. My biological dad's in Cedar Junction. 10-year sentence for armed robbery. The revelation explained much about Marcus, his initial wariness of authority figures, his fierce self-reliance, the drive to create stability through tangible skills. When he gets out next year, he'll have nothing. No job skills, no prospects. Marcus looked up from the tools. Places like you're volunteering at might be his only chance. I'd never considered my volunteer work in such personal terms. For Marcus and students like him, my willingness to teach former inmates represented hope that their own family members might find paths forward after incarceration. The boundary between my teaching worlds was more permeable than I'd realized. That realization led to an unexpected proposal. During my third volunteer session at the Charlestown facility, I pulled aside the program director, a former social worker named Alicia Mendez. What would you think about creating a mentorship connection between Westridge Technical and your program, I suggested. Advanced students gaining teaching experience while reinforcing their own skills. Program participants getting more individualized instruction. Alicia's eyes widened. You'd face significant opposition from parents, the school board. Probably, I acknowledged. But we could start small. Carefully selected students, appropriate supervision, limited initial scope. The idea took root, growing despite institutional resistance. Kate helped draft a formal proposal, leveraging her marketing skills to emphasize mutual benefits and community impact. The Integrity Fund provided seed funding for enhanced security measures and additional tools. By summer's end, the Bridge Skills Partnership had secured preliminary approval for a pilot program starting that fall. Through it all, Michael maintained a respectful distance. He attended carpentry sessions as a participant, but never attempted to take credit for the expanding program. His own progress was evident in the improving quality of his woodwork, clean joints, precise measurements, growing patience with difficult techniques. In late August, he approached me after a session. I'm being transferred to the Boston facility next month. Different schedule, different focus. I won't be continuing with this program. I see. I was surprised by a twinge of something like disappointment. Moving on to other skills training. Michael shook his head. I've been offered a position with the Financial Literacy Project, teaching basics of budgeting and honest accounting practices to at-risk youth and adults, using my Harvard MBA for something worthwhile for a change. The position suited his background while providing an appropriate form of restitution. Teaching others to understand the financial systems he had once manipulated represented a fitting redirection of his education and experience. They can't pay much, he continued, but it's meaningful work with people who genuinely need the knowledge. Sounds worthwhile, I offered, recognizing the echo of my own career journey in his description. Michael hesitated, then asked the question he'd clearly been building toward. I haven't contacted Kate, haven't tried to, but I've wondered, is she okay? She's more than okay, I replied honestly. She's thriving, building something valuable on her own terms. Relief crossed his face briefly. Good. That's good. He turned to go, then paused. I've learned something important from you, Mr. Carter. Something I wish I'd understood sooner. Real value isn't in appearance or recognition. It's in creating something that serves a genuine need, something built to last. It was the most authentic thing I'd ever heard him say. Fall brought new beginnings. Marcus began his technical college education, proudly reporting his progress during weekend visits to my workshop. Sophia Diaz, our other scholarship recipient, had secured an apprenticeship with a historic preservation specialist working on Beacon Hill brownstones, ironically properties similar to the one the Brooks family had once owned. Kate's mentorship program, connecting craftspeople with investors, continued to expand, gaining national attention through a feature in a business magazine. The New Craftsmanship Economy. The article called it, highlighting the growing market for high-quality, locally produced goods in an age of mass production and digital ephemera. They want to interview you too, Kate told me over Sunday dinner at my house. As the inspiration behind the program, I laughed off the suggestion. I'm just a shop teacher who wanted his students to build things properly. That's exactly why they should talk to you, Kate insisted. Your perspective matters. This movement toward valuing tangible skills and actual craftsmanship, it's a direct response to the kind of empty promises and digital smoke and mirrors that Michael was selling. People are hungry for authenticity. She was right, of course. The pendulum was swinging back toward appreciation of physical skills and tangible creation. My students were graduating into a world increasingly willing to value what they could build with their hands. The Bridge Skills Partnership launched in October with 4 West Ridge seniors mentoring participants at the Charlestown facility. The program faced predictable criticism from conservative parents and school board members concerned about criminal influences, but support from community leaders and local businesses helped weather the initial controversy. What no one had anticipated was the media attention. A local news station ran a feature on the program, interviewing students and participants about the mutual benefits of the mentorship model. The story was picked up by national outlets, framed as an innovative approach to both vocational education and reentry services. Principal Goodwin, initially hesitant, now embraced the program enthusiastically. This is exactly the kind of community engagement that distinguishes West Ridge. He told reporters, conveniently forgetting his early reservations. The unexpected spotlight brought a surge of interest in our technical education program. Enrollment applications doubled for the following year. Local businesses offered apprenticeship positions and equipment donations. The state education department inquired about expanding the model to other schools. In the midst of this whirlwind of attention, I received another unexpected email, this one from Elizabeth Brooks. Unlike Michael's humble request, her message carried the imperious tone I remembered well. Mr. Carter, Richard, and I will be in Boston next week for a brief visit. I believe it would be beneficial for all parties if we could meet privately to discuss certain matters. Please advise your availability. No apology for past behavior, no acknowledgement of the pain her family had caused Kate, just a presumptuous demand for my time. I was tempted to ignore it entirely, but curiosity won out. What could Elizabeth possibly want after all this time? I suggested, meeting at a public garden near the school neutral ground, with the benefit of fresh air and easy exits if needed. Kate was concerned when I told her about the planned meeting. She's not someone who admits mistakes, Kate warned. Whatever she wants, it's for her benefit, not yours. Elizabeth arrived precisely on time, dressed in expensive resort wear that seemed out of place in Boston's autumn chill. Florida living had tanned her skin and lightened her hair, but the calculating eyes remained unchanged. Thank you for agreeing to meet, she began, without preliminaries. I'll be direct. Richard and I are establishing a new foundation focused on financial education for young people. We'd like to make a substantial donation to your school's technical program. The offer was so unexpected I momentarily lost words. Why? Elizabeth's perfectly maintained exterior showed a brief crack of genuine emotion. Because my son destroyed his life following his father's example. Because we created a value system based entirely on appearances and acquisition. Because your program teaches young people to create something real. She straightened her designer scarf. The donation would be anonymous, of course. We have no interest in public recognition. For the first time, I considered that Elizabeth might be capable of genuine reflection. The humiliation of the Horizon collapse and subsequent investigations had apparently forced some reassessment, however limited. Any donation would need to go through proper channels, I replied carefully. The school board district administration, and I'd need to be certain there were no strings attached. No strings, Elizabeth confirmed. Just one request that financial literacy be incorporated into the curriculum. Real financial literacy, not the smoke and mirrors Richard practiced. The conversation left me unsettled. Was this genuine recognition of past wrongs or merely image rehabilitation? Did the source of the donation matter if students would benefit? I shared the encounter with Kate that evening, seeking her perspective. The money would help the program, she acknowledged, but accepting it feels like validating everything the Brooks family represents. Or it could mean their values are finally changing, I suggested. Kate considered this. People do change. I've seen it in Michael glimpses of someone thoughtful underneath all that conditioning, and I've certainly changed my definition of success, what I value, who I trust. She smiled ruefully. Maybe we should give Elizabeth the same opportunity for growth we've given ourselves. The decision wasn't simple. After extensive discussion with school administration and careful legal review of the donation terms, Westridge Technical accepted the Brooks Foundation gift with full transparency about its purpose, expanding technical education and incorporating practical financial literacy. No names would appear on buildings or programs, no public recognition sought. Winter descended on Boston with unusual gentleness that year. The expanded technical program flourished with students now learning not just how to build with wood and metal, but how to build sustainable businesses around those skills. The Bridge Partnership continued connecting incarcerated individuals with training opportunities, creating pathways towards stable employment. Kate's career evolved in unexpected directions. Her consulting work with the Integrity Fund led to a part-time teaching position at Bunker Hill Community College, instructing evening classes in ethical marketing practices for small businesses. She moved into a modest house in Jamaica Plain, renovating it slowly with skills learned in my workshop. One snowy December evening, as we worked together refinishing her kitchen cabinets, Kate broke our comfortable silence. I ran into Michael yesterday. My hand paused mid-stroke with the sandpaper. Where Farmers Market in Copley Square, he has a booth now selling simple woodworking pieces, cutting board small shelves. Nothing fancy but well made. Kate applied stain to a cabinet door with careful precision. He's living in Somerville still, teaching those financial literacy courses and building furniture in his spare time. Did you speak with him? I kept my tone neutral, allowing Kate to guide the conversation. Briefly, it was civil. He seems different, more grounded, less performative. Kate set down her brush. He mentioned you, said your teaching methods stayed with him, especially the emphasis on fundamentals and honest construction. The notion that my instruction had influenced Michael's reconstruction of his life carried a certain poetic justice. The very skills and values he had once mocked now provided his path forward. Are you okay? I asked Kate, seeing him unexpectedly like that. I am, she replied, sounding mildly surprised at her own answer. There was a time when I thought I'd never recover from what happened, the humiliation, the broken trust, watching everything collapse. But somehow I built something better from the wreckage. She looked around her half-renovated kitchen at the evidence of her own developing skills. We both did. As winter deepened, news arrived that would close one chapter definitively. Richard Brooks had died suddenly of a heart attack at their Florida home. The obituary mentioned his successful pharmaceutical career and charitable foundation, carefully omitting any reference to the financial improprieties or his son's legal troubles. Elizabeth returned to Boston for a memorial service, attended primarily by former business associates. Kate debated attending out of respect for Michael, but ultimately decided against it. That chapter of my life is closed, she explained. Opening it again wouldn't serve any purpose. Michael did attend, according to a brief email he sent afterward. A strange experience, he wrote. So many people eulogizing a version of my father that never existed. I realized I'm still working to separate the man from the myth, to forgive without denying the harm done. His journey toward authentic selfhood continued parallel to, but separate from Kate's. They would never reconcile, never recapture what had been lost, but perhaps they could each find peace in their separate paths forward. Spring returned, completing the cycle of seasons since the scholarship announcement. Marcus graduated with honors from his technical program and partnered with two other young craftsmen to open a small furniture studio in Dorchester. They specialized in custom pieces made from reclaimed materials, combining traditional joinery with contemporary design. Their first major commission came from the Integrity Fund's new office space. Kate invited me to the studio's opening celebration. As we watched Marcus proudly showing visitors around the workshop, she linked her arm through mine. You know what I realized recently? Everything that happened, all of it, even the painful parts, led us exactly where we needed to be. Around us, evidence of renewal abounded. Marcus explaining traditional joinery techniques to potential customers. Sophia, our other scholarship recipient, displaying architectural drawings for a historic restoration project. Former program participants from the Charlestown facility, now employed in construction and manufacturing. All lives touched by the simple belief that honest work properly done has inherent value. I used to think success meant escaping where I came from, Kate continued. Now I understand it means honoring those roots while growing in new directions. In that moment, watching my daughter's genuine happiness, I felt a completion that transcended the vindication of exposing Michael's fraud. The true victory wasn't in bringing down what was false, but in building up what was real. Honest work, genuine relationships, a legacy of creation rather than destruction. The measure twice cut once philosophy had guided my teaching for decades. Now it had become something larger, a life philosophy embraced by a growing community of students, craftspeople, and yes, even reformed financiers seeking authentic value in a world too often satisfied with empty promises.